So we do also need to know a little bit about how the periodic table was actually developed. So the first step in the development was actually before we even discovered the proton, the neutron, or the electron. So these are all not discovered yet. And at this point, scientists could only really go off one thing. They were just going off the atomic weight. And so what they did was they ordered by the weight. And so they arranged the elements in this table, ordered them by their weights. And so actually the early periodic table that scientists ended up with was quite incomplete, and it placed elements in inappropriate groups. And so in the modern periodic table, the groups actually, they do have several things in common and they share chemical properties. But when we tried to order these by weight, actually we found that some elements seem to be in the wrong group and didn't share properties with the other elements in that group that we would expect. And that is just following the strict order of atomic weights. So then this chap called Mendeleev came along, and he decided to actually overcome these problems by leaving gaps where he thought that elements still needed to be discovered. And the key thing about this was he didn't just try to force elements in places where they shouldn't be. He realized that actually in certain cases the elements didn't fit in their groups, didn't fit where they were meant to be according to atomic weight. So he left gaps, left spaces, and arranged the elements that way. And the key thing here is in those gaps actually later elements were actually discovered that actually fit into those gaps which he left. And on top of that, in some places he actually changed the order. He changed the order of the elements and didn't just strictly to the atomic weight. Okay, so those are the two main things that he did. And as we mentioned, the elements were then discovered, and so that deals with the first thing of leaving the gaps. And the second idea where he actually didn't strictly to the atomic weight, well, that was actually resolved by the discovery of isotopes. So because we know now that isotopes are the same element with the same number of protons but a different number of neutrons and therefore different atomic weights, what happened is that actually some isotopes made the atomic weight that should have been used slightly different than the one that people or scientists understood at that time. So actually the elements were in the correct order by their weight as well, but it just hadn't been, the correct isotopes just hadn't been discovered yet. And that's why ordering strictly on atomic weights wasn't always correct. And again, the Mendeleev was proved right. And so essentially then after that we came to our modern periodic table where all of the elements that we now know were discovered, and that basically filled in the gaps in Mendeleev's periodic table and explained essentially where the elements didn't seem to be ordered by atomic weight. Actually, it did fit because of the existence of isotopes. Okay, so that's the order of things and how the periodic table was developed, and you do need to know the basic order and the basic key facts that actually happened to lead to it. So let's do a few questions now to see what you remember. So a few questions for you guys then, feel free to pause the video and have a go. So question 1, name the key features of Mendeleev's periodic table. So there's two things we could say here. The first one is that he didn't order it strictly by atomic weight, so different ordering. So it was mostly by atomic weight, but in some cases he switched the order, didn't follow the atomic weight strictly. And the second feature is he left gaps. So he left gaps where he thought elements still needed to be discovered. Okay, how was the first periodic table arranged? Well, the first periodic table was arranged by the atomic weight, because remember, before even discovery of the proton and the neutron or the electron, we only had the weight to go off, so scientists just ordered it off of the weight. And the last question, name two issues with early periodic tables, even before Mendeleev. So we're talking about the periodic table before Mendeleev came along. So the first issue, you can say that it was actually incomplete. And that's just because a lot of the elements had not been discovered yet. So we didn't have a complete periodic table. And the second main issue, which we talked about, was the fact that elements seem to be not in the correct groups. So there seemed to be inappropriate grouping. Of elements where they didn't quite seem to fit together and they didn't follow similar chemical properties like we would expect and like we can see in the modern periodic table. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, and I'll see you guys in the next one.